The name of the game is Who Can Name What Is on Criterion 24/7 in the shortest period of time.
All right, are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Bill de jour.
Shit, it didn't even load.
Oh, fuck.
But also, like, I would have been like, Catherine Deneuve, oh no! And you would have already said Belle de Jour. And you would have been correct. God, we're the worst. These such nerds. Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals. I am your host, Eric Morgan.
And I'm Evan Davis.
Oh boy, we've got the NWSL back, which is good because I could not talk about a friendly for another week. This was not a particularly riveting set of games this weekend. Not that the matchups couldn't have produced riveting sets of games. We just had, other than Bay and the rain and that opening Friday chaos, all the games were sub 2 goals.
Yeah.
We had a dirty 0-0, couple of 1-0s.
I liked the action this weekend, if not for its entertainment value, then for this is sort of the moment now. We still got maybe 4 or 5 more games to go before we really have our feet under us about who these teams are and what they're going to be. But with 4 games under our belts, or even 3 for Gotham and San Diego, I think we've got a much better sense of some patterns emerging, which is why I was intrigued by some games, even if they weren't necessarily the most fun. Chicago Angel City, total slog. Very interesting, I thought. Same for North Carolina, Portland. North Carolina beating the XG again, but also having a very smart game plan and putting 2 bodies on Sam Coffey so Coffey could never pass in a vertical direction, which I thought was quite smart, and it worked out for them. So, yeah, I think there were interesting things that were shaping up, and I think our featured game this week is a very good example of that, about what Gotham and Kansas City in a 1-1 draw might be able to tell us about what they're gonna do, or what they're gonna look like, or what they're probably gonna have to work on as the season progresses.
I think that that's right. I think that what we're starting to see are teams that we thought we should be worried about becoming teams that we absolutely should be worried about.
Houston.
Utah. Yeah, those two teams that the panic button might be something people in Portland feel like hitting right now, but maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah, not yet.
I mean, bottom of the table, but by no means the worst team in this league, and with a positive XG.
Yeah.
That's not as much concern. Teams at the top of the table, Red Stars.
That ain't lasting.
Yeah. Who I think should be prepared for this to be a lovely start to the season. Look, you already got the points in the bag. So there's that.
Every point counts. And you know what? After everything we said about Alyssa Nair last week, she came up rather big in moments against Angel City.
She had a fine game. There are some teams that I think I'm of two minds about.
Yeah.
And I think of two minds about describes quite well this KC Current Gotham fixture. The rundown is we have this 1-1 draw, and we see the Current yet again get a relatively early goal. Then we see the Current reveal yet again, once up a goal, their willingness to let the opposition play.
Paying for it.
Yeah, and pay for it. But unlike in their opener against Portland, I think they paid for it at an acceptable cost. Ultimately, Gotham's goal, the Esther goal, is just a free header on a corner kick, something that is fixable. Kansas City doesn't allow a shot after, I think, the 73rd or 74th minute from Gotham.
It's nice that we're actually coming back to Kansas City, since we haven't really talked about them since the opening weekend. This is the lowest amount of XG that they've conceded across these first 4 games. So even though they are falling into this familiar great for the first 30, rough for the last 60 pattern, if their idea is to kind of use rest defense and soak up pressure and kind of defend in a really coordinated mid-block for a large chunk of the second half, maybe that's starting to fall into place, maybe, based on how they performed against Gotham. But with that said, I mean, Gotham could have won this game.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that's something that before we get too high on Kansas City supply really needs to be underlined, that, you know, that this was just, maybe Gotham beating themselves to some extent in the last 15 or 20 minutes. And also the refs, given that they weren't allowed to take a corner kick right at final whistle, which Juan Carlos Amorós was not happy about.
I think that that's always a place of contention. You're a minute beyond what has already been assessed for extra time.
And there wasn't a lot of stoppage in the stoppage time. And yeah.
I think if you're past that minute, you shouldn't have any reasonable expectation of ever taking that corner.
Yeah, but coaches are going to be coaches. Got to defend their people.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's go through this section by section here. You made the point on opening weekend when they played Portland that Kansas City's level of pressing in the opening quarter, opening 30, 35 minutes of the game is what catches a lot of teams out, especially attack-minded teams who want to play really, really high up, and that can lead to good chances. That paid off here, and if we want to talk about taking stock of the first month of the season, can we talk about Temwa Chawinga, please?
Yeah, that's where I want to start. Despite the fact I think that Chawinga is a very good player, I think that teams are still naive about the pace she possesses. And speed kills. It absolutely kills. Let's just talk about that opening goal, which comes off of a Gotham corner. Chawinga wins a header to Bia 75 yards from goal. Mm-hmm. And then she breaks two lines just in a dead sprint, and Bia plays a through ball that to most strikers would not be useful, but to Chawinga is right in stride, and Chawinga, with a semi-awkward finish, sort of chips over the keeper with the inside of her right foot. I was thinking, man, she is so off to the races here. Can one prevent this kind of counterattacking goal from Kansas City? But also, if she doesn't have the opportunity to use that pace, if you can find ways to limit that, what are the sum total of the chances she's able to create outside of that? I'm very on the fence because I think the special skill's very special.
It's a fair point, and the first 4 games, if we're going to talk about naivete that Kansas City has played, they've played teams that like to keep their fullbacks high and leave space out on the wings where Chawinga can feast, whether it was Portland or whether it was Angel City, or if it was Gotham over the weekend. And you want to talk about naivete or trying to be too clever by half. Juan Carlos Amorós made some pretty bold tactical decisions with the objective, I think, of trying to neutralize Chawinga, that when combined with Gotham's persistent desire to always be pushing forward and engaging in what they call organized chaos and attack, left them nastily exposed at the back. And it all starts with moving Tierna Davidson over to left back, who is a player that is not necessarily gifted with a ton of pace and does not have either wide instincts or progression instincts in higher areas of the field. So if you look at Gotham's passing network, you see how the entire left channel for Gotham was more or less abandoned for the first half of the game because Davidson is not getting forward very often. And she's pinching in quite sharply because that's her instinct. She is a trained center back, but her job was to mark Chawinga and follow Chawinga.
It's a disastrous matchup.
It did not work in the first half because tactics and players' instincts, I think, were clashing. And also Chawinga was also just like, fuck it, you're going to take away the right channel? Well, I'm just going to cut you open through the middle, which is where her run comes from.
And frankly, Chawinga could have had his first goal before the opener in the 7th or so minute and generates an almost 0.3 XG chance right there. Look, if Kansas City have unearthed around 0.7 XG 90, around a 0.3 XA 90 player, around a non-penalty goal per 90 player, I will eat my hat on that one because that is the player she has been through 4 weeks. That said,
it's still early. It's only 4 games.
And the combo with Bia is a really classic, nice, tall, short speed hold up. In terms of practical application, Kansas City couldn't have expected more from this tandem than what they've already gotten. Yet still, I want to see a lot more from Chawinga, particularly now that people have tape. I mean, it's one thing to know how fast a player is. It's another thing to literally watch her beat every midfielder and then every defender on the dead sprint.
We talked about it in the opening game against Portland, and I raised that exact piece of skepticism. Like, is pace kind of more difficult things to scout when you are early on a player? Because it's one thing to watch it, it's one thing to feel it, so to speak. So maybe that's still in play.
I think it is fair to say early indications are that Kansas City, I don't want to say they're a good team yet, but I definitely think that there's the potential for them to be a very decent playoff team at this point, which is not where we had them at the beginning of this season. They have 9 different goal scorers. They have shown that they can play with a lot of talent not on the field or injured. I mean, this team will get Dabinia back. This team just kind of keeps on clicking.
I'm not maybe as convinced as you in that respect.
I feel like having these 10 points logged already to start the season makes a big difference. I suspect we will see the current, as teams begin playing them deeper, possess more, simply out of necessity. And I think that will be more true as well when Dabinia is back, a player who will certainly help them improve their ball retention.
Yeah, but also I think we should think about more broadly the players who are really going to have to be responsible for both retention and progression, which is the engine room a little bit deeper on the field. Vanessa DiBernardo, Claire Hutton, and Lola Bonta. DiBernardo can't seem to play past minute 65 so far this year. Hard to say why, whether that's age and losing some fitness, whether it's an after effect of the concussion that she struggled with for months last year. Can't say at the moment, but that is really, really tough when she was your deep-lying playmaker and at times more advanced playmaker in the absence of Dabinia. If you can't keep her on the field for 80 to 90 minutes a game consistently, where do you fill that hole? Labonta's injured right now. She didn't play. Bailey Feist came in. Bailey Feist had a pretty decent game, but You'd rather have Labonta on the field. And then Hutton has, I think, cooled off a bit from that hot start that she had. And she's 18, so, a lot of time to develop and bed in. But I think that midfield zone, if teams start playing them deeper and Kansas City has to hold on to the ball more, is not necessarily a guaranteed home run here.
It's not that this team has solved all of its problems, but a marginal uptick in quality from where they were last year, in my mind, already makes them a pretty good team. And I had not anticipated that. I did not think that elements of this team it was impossible to see Claire Hutton, and it's possible she is not the player that we've seen through 4 games, but she's very promising. It is also possible that just simply having more players as they get healthy sort of slot in, this team can find a nice groove and be okay.
Maybe the better way to say it is that Kansas City's floor is a lot higher than we anticipated.
That's exactly right. Kansas City's floor is a lot higher than we anticipated.
If Labonta and Dabinia can get healthy, then all of a sudden Ananovsky has those 4 midfielders to pick and choose from or potentially play all at the same time. With Michelle Cooper now healthy and getting some minutes against Gotham over the weekend, and with Bia and Chawinga, if not necessarily superstars, clearly creditable NWSL forwards, then yes, I think that they are in much better shape than we thought they would be. And that's really interesting.
I want to hit this one point as well, because I do think that the game state has been massive for them so far. This team has been able to play, whether this is sustainable or not, I don't know. I'm certainly open to it. But this team has been able to gain leads and hold leads just barely enough. But also against San Diego, they put together a really credible performance there as well. Their schedule to open this season should have been a murderer's row, and instead, they've got 10 points. Home to Portland, not great. Away to San Diego, really tough. Home to Angel City, playoff team last year, softest fixture of this first 4. Away to defending champion and who I think have the highest floor in this league, Gotham. That's a really impressive 4 teams to have 10 points from. And they're about to go into a section of the season where Bay, not super strong. If there were one more team that Chawinga could fool about speed at the back.
And catching out your naivete of keeping your fullbacks high, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a Chawinga-rich fixture on 420. Angel City, the Dash, the Rain. This is a next set of fixtures where Kansas City could reasonably, of course, watch them grab 1 point from these 4 fixtures. But where that high floor for them suddenly becomes really interesting as they play teams that they are probably better than. Let's flip over to Gotham, a team that I am not particularly worried about, and a team that I feel like played with one arm behind their back in the first half, or one wing behind their back, and then liberated that left wing and completely changed the game.
Yeah. There were times at which you felt like Gotham was beating themselves, and times at which you felt like, well, this is why you went out and signed all the players that you did, because your depth can mitigate so many potential issues. We haven't really talked about Midge Purse, not going to be available for the rest of the season because of her ACL tear, but
devastating.
Yasmin Ryan becomes your right winger. Pretty great. Lynn Williams is healthy again and got some minutes toward the end of the game. And we already mentioned how Amorós kind of outthought himself with moving Davidson out wide. Well, in the second half, he adjusted. And he brought Jenna Neiswanger and Crystal Dunn into the game, moved Davidson back to center back, and the team looked pretty functional. But it should also be said that even before halftime, they were starting to grow into the game. That Katie Stengel chance just a couple minutes before halftime was showing that they were finding pockets, particularly on the right seam through Yasmin Ryan, that were working.
I think that Gotham, obviously, I think that Dunn and Neiswanger didn't get full matches because of the She Believes fixtures.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I also think Amorós really, truly thought he needed someone with a lot of defensive steel taking care of Temwa Chawinga for 90 minutes. And so he thought, oh, well, I'll combine necessity with opportunity here. And it didn't really work out.
You still nearly grab a goal on Katie Stengel's two excellent chances. In the 23rd minute, those chances.
Yeah, that goal line scramble.
And then she has another really excellent chance right before the half. She had a great game. I think she ended up with 7 shots, something like that, and was creating problems for Kansas City's backline and really doing a nice job facilitating. Still, Gotham is a completely different team the minute Neiswanger and Dunn become the new left side. That is where the best chances of the opening of the second half come from. And that's eventually, even though the goal is from a set piece, it's that flank creating opportunity for a corner that eventually gets us to the goal.
Yeah, a lot of Gotham's progression, especially in dangerous areas, were through the wings. Their whole idea is to use the wings to stretch play and then hit you where it counts in central channels, which are the most valuable areas to take shots from and create chances from. But there has been a little bit of an imbalance and also an attempt without a lot of success to try and figure out how to fill the hole that's left by Rose Lavelle. They won a championship last year without a true number 10. They're trying to do something similar now that Emily Sonnet's here by having Sonnet and Delaney Sheehan sort of be interchangeable 8-10 hybrids, and also using Esther's natural desire to drop deep and hold up to be another player to join attack in deeper central areas. I'm not super convinced that it's working super effectively. It should be mentioned that their first 3 games, only 1 non-penalty XG per game. That's 11th out of the 14 teams in the league. Again, 3 games, whatever. But it should be noted that it has happened. Sonnet yesterday, only 4 progressive passes and carries. Not a lot. Didn't generate any expected assists. It's not her game, but Amorós seems to think that just due to the fact of her generally superior technical abilities, that she can be a source for progression to interchange with Sheehan as you move the ball into the final third. I'm not totally convinced that it's optimal.
I was thinking about, as I was watching Emily Sonnet attempt to play a credible 8-10, of the old Bill Shankly quote, "A football team is like a piano. You need 8 men to carry it and 3 who can play the damn thing." And Emily Sonnet is one of the best carriers of a team, but she is not a piano player as far as facilitating the offense. It's a real head scratcher to me about why you would take a player like Emily Sonnet and try to wedge her into this thing that really isn't what she is. At the same time, diminish, because of these new responsibilities, the best thing she does, which is positional discipline, breaking up play, and quickly establishing possession, right?
Like bringing Neiswanger and Dunn on in the second half and moving Davidson back to center back, Sonnet dropped deeper and started working as a double pivot with Neely Martin through a lot of the second half. And It looked, even though that they didn't generate much in the second half, it was a lot more balanced. And Sonnet seemed like she was more comfortable there.
Completely. I think the quality of a coach is just as much about how they respond to things not working.
Sure.
As it is how right they get their lineup. And I think Amorós passes this game, in my mind, with flying colors, because essentially everything that didn't work in the first half, he identified and Kansas City was unable to repeat in the second half. Some of that is Kansas City not electing to repeat elements of their play. But by and large, I think every sub was effective. And then we got to the problem, the third phase of game, where it is, what is the value of Gotham's possession? It was that phase of play where, missing a Rose Lavelle, you didn't have that agitating dribbler who could sort of break down the low block that Kansas City had eventually settled in. And you just kind of couldn't find that chance.
It's so interesting that this is emerging because this was sort of Gotham's problem last year too, was that they could be really aggressive in their pressure, look really exciting until they got in and around the box, and then all of a sudden they just couldn't generate good chances. I mean, so far this year, they're generating 2 shots from turnovers in the attacking third per game. That's tied for 4th in the league. That's what you expect from a Juan Carlos Amorós side. They're being really fast and direct. 1.9 meters per second is the speed at which they're progressing the ball up the field. That's number 2 in the league. But still, they're sitting in 11th place on non-penalty XG generated per game. And besides, I think there was a Katie Stengel chance in like the 61st, 62nd minute. That was like pretty decent, but otherwise they were kept very, very quiet. And as you say, not even one shot after the 75th. They haven't solved that problem yet. And clearly they signed Lavelle to help them solve that problem, but still that bugbear is rearing its head again.
Some of it is how many new players you are bringing into a team at once. And so there's just a familiarity factor that I think is harder to quantify, but is something that as we watch this team, and we saw it at the end of the second half of last season, Esther took time to bed in, and then once bed in was very devastating. And now that she's there, she's facilitating beautifully. Her goal is excellent. It's a great headed finish. It's a free header, but she plays it perfectly. That said, she was doing a lot in terms of movement that created. But once we sort of got later into the game and Kansas City was so deep, that movement was a little bit neutralized. And I think it has to do, in my mind, with then suddenly you just need those reps to break down a deep back line consistently. That's where like years of having players playing together and knowing where their instincts are, that's where the growth eventually happens. And Gotham is being built to be dominant for a period of time. I mean, this year, next year, but the window's like maybe 3 years with the players that they have. And we're still very early into that. I think against Kansas City, who may be more credible, this is just a game that they'll look at and Gotham will begin figuring out little intricacies that make the difference, that allow them to beat Kansas City's down the road. That said, you know, how many minutes together does Emily Sonnet have with Jenna Neiswanger and Lynn Williams? On the national team, sure, but on this team, we're still early in the Jenna Neiswanger days. We're a season in. So I think the pieces are there. It's just that movement to break open a team. I'll give them a little like early season pass because I think the caliber of play and player there. This is actually a really tough opening season for Gotham has played the Wave, the Thorns, the Courage, and the Current. That's a good set of teams, as best as I can tell. It's a gauntlet. And their next opponents, the Spirit, that's going to be tough. But then Louisville, North Carolina again, and Houston.
There's only one gimme in that, and that's Houston.
We will know a lot more about this Gotham team shortly. But right now, do we have concerns about Amorós and his ability to fix his team in game? I don't really. Do we have concerns about the caliber of players that they have there? Just about how long it'll take for them to coalesce. Are we concerned about their ability to create goals? That's one that I want to sit with.
The top 5 teams by touches in the attacking third so far this year. Touches per 90, I should say, in the attacking third. San Diego, Portland, Angel City, North Carolina, Gotham. Top 5 teams with touches in the box. San Diego, Angel City, Portland, North Carolina, Gotham. None of those 4 teams that I just listed have a lower non-penalty XG per 90 than Gotham does. I think what, if not necessarily raises a red flag, but it raises maybe, a taupe flag, that this is what they did last year too. That even with the new players, there is this certain element of continuity there where they can get the ball into dangerous areas a lot and work with the ball in dangerous areas a lot, but not necessarily produce meaningful opportunities to score, especially relative to their peers at the top of some of those leaderboards that I just rifled off.
I think this game, as one breaks down the phases of play, it is an initial high-octane outburst from Kansas City that Gotham is adjusting to. The goal doesn't necessarily come from that pressing. It comes from a well-organized counterattack with one person who has lightning in their shoes. Then Kansas City sort of sit off against a team that got their tactics wrong, correct their tactics, first on the field and then with substitutions, then have a phase of play where they are utterly dominant and Kansas City is just hanging on, but then don't have, in that final 20-minute block, don't have that extra gear that allows them to turn this result over, and Kansas City has kind of just enough to hold on. That is how you end up at this 1-1 draw, just looking at the game itself. That said, this is a game where we learn that Kansas City could contain such a team, but might not always be able to. And this is a game where we learned that Gotham still have lingering problems that didn't prevent them from winning a title last year, but that have been there as a part of this team for a long time. And without Midge Purce, who gives them an element that really would have helped them. I mean, Midge Purce, in addition to what Gotham was already bringing yesterday, we might have a different result. But without Midge Purce, there is a big hole, and without Rose Lavelle healthy, you're without your two best dribbling breakdown players. And I kind of don't know where they get that next one.
Well, it helps to have Crystal Dunn.
But Dunn is also being deployed deeper than Purse or Lavelle would be. So it's just put a pin in Gotham. I am curious about where the goals are coming from.
What tactical approach keeps allowing for players of such high talent levels to not produce? That's always been the big question mark in my brain about what Juan Carlos Amorós' organized chaos attack is and can be. Trust the players you have. Which, again, it goes back to what they did in the second half. It's actually when you trust your best players to play in their best positions and do what they do best, it works out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in this instance, it's a Gotham team that is still figuring some stuff out. It's still early days. There are things to put a pin in, but certainly no one should be concerned for them just yet.
Before we go, we should mention, if you want to talk about organized chaos, Chelsea's out of the FA Cup semifinal. This is our Emma Hayes check-in segment. And in what fashion? I mean, Man United won 2-1, and I'm still at a loss at how they did that. Because
You mean how Chelsea on 26 shots, lost 2-1 to a Man United team that only registered 2 shots on target, both of which went in? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that.
It's because if you manage to score on your first 2 shots of the game, or your early 2 shots of the game, boy, you stand a real puncher's chance at just parking a bus and having it work out.
Yeah, they didn't even park the bus that well. That's what's funny about it.
Yeah.
I want to pull up Footy Stats is a website that you can look at some of these smaller competitions and find XG data. It's spotty, and I'm not totally sure how their methodology works, but it does give you some sense of what was going on. The XG on that game was 3.1 to 0.8 in Chelsea's favor.
Shit happens. It's why when teams can really string together seasons the way North Carolina did toward the end of last decade, you just sort of marvel, because it is so hard to be that consistently good, because the sport has this in its locker.
Emma Hayes, she's having a tough couple of weeks. Let's put it that way. I mean, personally, she's reading Robert Frost poems instead of apologizing to people in press conferences.
Well, yeah, no, that's a mess.
Yeah.
She should stop that.
She's having a tough time losing 2 cup knockout games back-to-back against close rivals.
And she's in a dogfight in the league with Man City now. The Champions League, it's still elusive, and Barcelona's a really tough draw. But yeah, it turns out even having a really good team doesn't guarantee you shit.
I just don't want her to carry that stress into the U.S. job, I think is what I'm getting at. Heavy lies the head that wears the crown, and it seems heavier than it's ever been for her these last 2 or 3 weeks. So lighten the fuck up, Emma. Kidding. You do you.
I mean, Emma Hayes will have, in her final league fixture on May 18th, an ideal opportunity to exact revenge against Man United.
Yeah, and it could be a title decider, too.
Exactly. So, Emma, chin up. Most games that you register 26 shots against your opposition, you will win. Yeah, as it turns out, editing really matters.
You know what else matters? Expected own goals. And I hope you Rate us, review us, follow us, tell all your friends about us. Only rate us 5 stars if you're going to rate us at all. If you think we have an own goal, please email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. And follow us on all social media channels at xowngoals. That's the letter X own goals. We are on Blue Sky. And I hope you're listening to the ASA show if you're a Major League Soccer fan over at American Soccer Analysis, our official content partners, because those guys do great work.
You really can hear the delight in their voices as the numbers roll in and they can start extracting real value from those numbers. We too are excited for those numbers rolling in.
I was going to say, are we going to have a little bit more pep in our step in about 4 weeks?
That's correct. Even next week at 5 games, we're stickier.
Every game is stickier, so buckle up, kids. We will talk to you in 7 days' time.
Bye.